Hey guys, my name is Jeff, and today we're checking out the very funky Subaru Solterra, a compact EV SUV, which is actually a Toyota. Underneath, this is a Toyota BZ4X. They share the platform, and as you'll see on the interior, things like the infotainment system are very much Toyota. Now, some of the differences for the Subaru Solterra, which starts at $45,000, is that it's only offered with all-wheel drive. So that's a dual motor setup, and that fits right at home in Subaru's lineup with things like the X-Mode off-road drive modes to do some light off-roading if you wanted. Now this one we'll be taking a look at today is the Touring top-of-the-line model, and as equipped is around $55,000. And I'll take you through the exterior, the interior, the powertrain. Of course, we'll take it for a drive. So here it is, the Subaru Solterra in two-tone, and here is the key. Lock, unlock, power hatch, and of course, a hold for AC button, which is great for hot days like this. Now this one is finished in cosmic pearl white, and these are really funky looking vehicles. We actually have two different shades of black. We have these plastic fenders, and in the front they look quite awkward, but of course that's even shared similarly to what you'll find on the Toyota cousin. You see, the rear, they're just like over fenders, which is normal, common, looks fine, but in the front, the way they sort of wrap around into the front makes it almost look unfinished. I feel like they should have kind of left it black fender here, and then this should have all been body color, so it looks a little bit funky in that regard, because you can see the rest of the car, the mirrors, the top of the hood, and even the roof are actually all in this galactic gloss black color. So you have different shades of black on the exterior while having our main body color. A little bit funky, but you tell me what you think about that below. Now, starting with the actual details of the car, some of the things that change from the Toyota counterpart are going to be things like the headlights, the badging, of course. Here we have these LED headlights, LED fog lights, and a Subaru badge, but of course fairly aerodynamic with cameras in the front. We do have these 20-inch wheels on the side, all-wheel drive, four-wheel disc brakes with regenerative braking, and of course EV badging with the actual fast charging being on the driver's side in the same position. We have our power folding mirrors here, which do of course have some cameras. One of my favorite features is the fact that we have things like 5-door keyless entry, so you can open any door with the keys in your pocket, which is a nice luxurious touch, which used to be reserved for very expensive vehicles, but it's here in the more moderately priced Solterra. We do have these fixed roof rails, so you can take it off-road, put stuff up here, and use it like you would any other Subaru. You can see that the rear glass is tinted there, and as we come to the back, there's some interesting stuff going on. We obviously have this very swept back look, but we also have this like weird dual spoiler thing. There's like a mini spoiler here that's a little bit funky, and then there's this double winged spoiler at the top. Now, this being an SUV, those aren't really doing anything for performance, and they're a little bit funky, especially this one down here, which has this awkward gap above our rear LED taillights. Nonetheless, as we take a look at the rest of it, we do have our power folding hatch, more cameras, symmetrical all-wheel drive, and of course Touring, noting that this is the top of the line trim model. Go ahead and look lower here. We actually have this rear diffuser to help move air from underneath, not something you typically see in SUVs, but it is on here nonetheless. Some of the other cool details like the power hatch, which we can go ahead and demonstrate with the vehicle, opens nice and quickly, so great for things like grocery bags, and get easy access to the rear storage, which isn't absolutely massive, but it is pretty good, especially while still having your rear seats, which can be folded down if you absolutely needed them to, and even our sub for our Harmon kardon sound system. So not too shabby in there with all of the various functionality. Is a quick look at the exterior of the Subaru Solterra. So next, let's go ahead and move on to the interior, which if we open it up, this is very much the interior from a Toyota, but it's also kind of a funky interior. Obviously, you have this flat top and flat bottom steering wheel. This looks like it's straight out of a Prius here in the way they did this display, the general steering wheel appearance, definitely a Toyota infotainment system. But over here, we actually have the Subaru sort of StarTex material. This is their sort of water resistant, more durable material, and it's even these perforated seat centers, some side bolstering, some slight leg bolstering, power adjustable, heated and ventilated here with a heated steering wheel. Of course, all stuff that comes standard for the Touring model. Heated seats come standard on the middle limited trim, but you don't get any of that if you buy the lower trim. But before we get too far into the tech in the front here, I want to actually hop in the back seat. So if we go ahead and open this door up here, keyless entry in the back, and we can see a similar pattern here on the interior of our back seats. And more importantly, if we get in here, we can see that we also have heated seats in the back, some chargers, and even some vents, which is quite a nice feature. You can also see the actual moonroof here, which is also accessible accessible for the people in the back seat. The other thing that's important to point out is even though this is kind of like a compact mid-size SUV, there is quite a lot of room in here. So I am 6 foot even for reference, and as you can see here, my head does not actually touch the roof, which is a really cool thing to have in a vehicle like this. And with the seat set up for me, my knees aren't actually touching the back seat either. So that's also quite impressive. I would say I could actually sit back here quite comfortably for a long time. You could fit any adults back here, or for road trips. Obviously people who are probably like 6'5" or so will definitely need that front seat, but this is pretty impressive for the size because it's still fairly easy to park, all things considered. So you'll have no problem fitting people back here for whatever you need. Now with that, let's go ahead and hop back up in the front so we can move on to the specific details. So if we go ahead and climb in here, we have our push button start, so we can go ahead and kick it on. Everything's powering up. Subaru Solterra. And we'll knock the AC down a little bit, even though it's quite hot in here. Had the ventilated seats on, because again, quite hot. Now, some of the interesting things, you have a digital display here at the top and a digital display here in the center. The first thing I want to talk about is the digital display here at the top, because it's probably the strangest one. Now, from my perspective, this is at my eye line. You can see that the screen is kind of obstructed by the steering wheel. And I don't know why they did that. If you look low, you can kind of read it, or if you try to sit above it, you can read it, but it's just kind of a weird thing for me. I understand why the Prius had the center display for everything for so long, and then they kind of switch it over here and it's obstructed by the steering wheel, which is a little bit frustrating. There's certain things like the charge that I can't see without moving while trying to maintain a comfortable driving position, and that's kind of frustrating. Now here on the steering wheel, we have a variety of different buttons here. Obviously you can see some of our various control modes here, our various sound systems, adjustments for the digital displays, volume control, voice activation, all pretty standard stuff here on the wheel. There's actually some paddle shifters for manual shifting if you so inclined, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense on EVs, but it's still there nonetheless. We actually have memory seating for our seats here, lock, unlock, power mirror adjustments, all of our window controls, our hatch power, and even some of our controls here, including a switch to go ahead and pop the front trunk, which is pretty cool. As we move on to the center, this right here is definitely a Toyota display. Subaru has switched to that sort of vertical iPad style, and they've tried to retain some of these Subaru features, like the fact that we have the X mode drive buttons. So for example, if we hit the X mode, you can see it change here on that front digital display for our gauges, for our various drive modes to sort of help improve traction when off-roading. But this is actually quite good that this is the Toyota infotainment system. In my opinion, they make one of the better infotainment systems currently. It's fairly simple, but still has all of the functionality for the things you'll want. Wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto while maintaining navigation, Bluetooth, etc. All that stuff can be found in here. And because this car is one of the higher trim models, it is of course equipped with that Harman Kardon sound system, which is where the volume is run through. One of the weird things is typically you'll see like a dial, for example. We actually have physical volume buttons and power buttons here, which is kind of funny because the rest of the buttons for things like the climate control are not physical buttons. They are these sort of haptic feedback things that can be a little bit frustrating to use while driving because you can't really tell where they are. If you're focused on the road, there's no physical layout to really help you find exactly what you're looking for without taking your eyes off the road. You do get those heated and ventilated seats here, which have the auto functionality. We of course have the various buttons to control the various temperature, and I believe that this is dual zone climate control. Yep, so dual zone climate control here as well, so you can adjust it for the passenger and the driver. And then we have some really interesting buttons down here. Now this is the shifter, which is quite interesting. You push it down and to the left for reverse, brings up our cameras, and then over to drive, and you push it down to the right. Now this is kind of an interesting system. I think it works fine for an EV instance in this case. Over here to the left, this weird shoe button, which is quite an interesting symbol, is going to be that S drive mode. And what that means is this is essentially going to turn it into single pedal driving. So when you press this, the minute you let off the gas, the regenerative braking kicks in and will start slowing the vehicle down. So that's what that is. You can turn it off or off easily, on or off with a quick touch of a button. Over here on the right, we have our drive modes. So you have a power and an eco mode, and obviously that's going to change how the vehicle responds to your pedal inputs, with eco mode sort of limiting your throttle inputs to try and improve battery life, and power being pretty self-explanatory as the go fast mode. You have a camera button, so you hit that and you get easy access to look at your cameras, which makes it easier to park or just check how well you parked. You also get your parking assist, that X-Mode button I mentioned earlier, and then this is your adaptive driving cruise control button, which is kind of a weird place to put it here in the middle, but there it is nonetheless. Traction control buttons. Here in the center behind this hidden compartment is our wireless charger with a USB port. And then you have these funky cup holders. Now these funky cup holders are really deep recessed, meaning if you have something little, it can be a little bit funky to grab it, or if you have something tall, it could also be funky to grab it because it kind of sits at the even line here. It's a little bit weird, kind of feels like an afterthought. One of the benefits of an EV with no real transmission, we of course have some more storage and even charging ports available down low here. In this, we do actually have some storage. So a pretty simple look at everything, but more importantly, some of my favorite features when it comes to SUVs is this. Regular mirror, go to flick this back, and you have a video camera. In my opinion, this should be standard, at least on SUVs, especially when you have people in the back seat. It can be hard to see out your back window, and if you have a full-size SUV, it's even harder. But by having a camera here for your rear view mirror, you instantly look past all of that, and now you get unblocked visibility, which is quite nice for driving, and I really, really like the feature here in this vehicle. I think it does a lot for the money. You of course get your various gate or garage controls available, lots of our doors. We of course have our sunroof. All of that is available here in the Subaru. You have these weird like soft touch materials in some parts, but most of it is plastic, kind of soft touch here in the doors as you can see. So that makes it a little bit more comfortable for resting your elbow. It's a little bit of a funky interior that is very much Toyota at heart, but the way some of the things were implemented feels like they just needed a place to stick buttons that they wanted in the car, and so the placement doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. But I think with time you'll get used to it. It's all very easily in reach, so there's no funkiness there. It's just going to take some time, and you might not notice that when you first start driving the vehicle. The Subaru Solterra differs from its Toyota counterpart by only having one powertrain option. So under the hood here, we have a all-wheel drive dual electric motor setup, which produces a combined 215 horsepower, whereas the Toyota counterpart is available with a front-wheel drive and the all-wheel drive powertrain. But you only get one option here in the Subaru, which makes sense because that better aligns with Subaru's philosophy of generally equipping all of their vehicles with all-wheel drive and trying to make them a bit more off-road focused. Now this powertrain, while it's not a ton of power, this thing will do 0 to 60 in a respectable 6.5 seconds, which should be more than enough to get you out of most situations and have no problem going up hills. The other thing that's cool is that dual function motor actually gets you the dual mode X mode, which is Subaru's sort of off-road system that'll adjust the all-wheel drive for things like dirt, snow, muddy conditions, things like that, to sort of improve your grip. Now this motor system features a 72.8 kilowatt hour battery, and it does of course have a 120 volt battery charging cable. Moving on to the important things, let's talk range. Now this has an EPA rated 222 miles of range when fully charged, which isn't great, and that means you get about 160 miles of highway range, which isn't ideal either. You get an 11-hour charge time at 240 volts, and it does have a quick charge. It'll get you from 10 to 80% in 35 minutes, which isn't too shabby. The only big downside there is total range. There's a lot of other EVs in this price range which have a closer to 300-mile range, which to me is much more acceptable from what you expect a vehicle like this. But if you're in a position to charge it every night, then maybe this doesn't seem so bad for what you get. Okay, so what's it like to drive the Subaru Solterra? Well, if we're being totally honest, it drives like a Toyota. I mean, at heart, that's who designed it. The power steering feels just like a Toyota. I would say it's almost akin to any Toyota EV or hybrid is kind of what it feels like at heart. Now, for now, it's kind of feel free floating. It feels like it'll coast a long time, but I'm gonna go ahead and push the rear foot button. That's gonna go ahead and activate our S mode, which is gonna add that regenerative braking that'll slow down the car anytime we take off the accelerator pedal. So for example, if I take my foot off, you essentially have one pedal driving and the car starts slowing down. So that's a pretty cool feature about this car. Obviously, that's going to be something that a lot of people are familiar with. If you're familiar with EVs, a lot of them tend to feature one pedal driving. Most most of the ones that don't, let's say, are not necessarily the good ones. But we have that here, which is a good sign. I don't like the visibility of the actual display here. The way I have the seat set up that's comfortable for me, that I feel has good visibility through the car, actually blocks the charging. So in other words, it blocks the range and what I can actually see out of the vehicle, which can be a little bit frustrating. The actual visibility out of the car is quite good. These A-pillars are fairly far set forward where they really don't block your vision that much. The fact that we have the video camera available for the rear view mirror means you have good visibility there as well. The mirrors are easy to adjust, and the vehicle size is actually quite compact while still having good size in the interior. Means that you don't feel cramped in here while you're driving the vehicle. You can have a passenger and still be quite comfortable, but you also get the added ease of easy parking, especially somewhere here like Phoenix where it's a bit more of a dense cityscape. So all in all, not bad. The other thing I'll point out is we're currently next to this construction site, but you don't hear a single thing out of this car. This car is incredibly quiet. You don't hear any road noise, no rotational mass from the wheels or anything like that, and there's even no powertrain noise. This vehicle's incredibly quiet. Now, if you were to stomp on it, you do get a little bit of added noise, but all in all, it is quite impressive. You know, Toyota is an incredible, solid vehicle build. There's no excess rattles that you hear in the vehicle. It feels quite solidly built, which is a confidence instilling thing for this vehicle. The overall usage of the vehicle is quite good. I like the interactions with things. The only things that are kind of vague, as I mentioned, in the interior is your interactions with the buttons. But all in all, it's not a bad driving experience. It's not exhausting. I would say it's easy to use as a appliance or utility vehicle. It's not anything crazy. I think you might have to get used to some of the interacting with some of the various machines, the screens and all that in this vehicle. And the wheel can be a bit frustrating at times too, mostly because it's a square. So the minute you start parallel parking, or if you're reversing and you like to look out the back window physically, you might reach for the wheel and you might miss what you think is the top of the wheel because of this flat portion. But that's just a general problem with flat wheels like this, which isn't specific to the Solterra, let's say. The Prius and even Tesla has like that yoke, which is a little bit of a funky wheel. It's not a great wheel for real world use, but it's still kind of usable here. At least you have the top and the bottom part on this wheel. So that's a quick look. It's not an overly interesting, dynamically engaging experience, but it's easy and it works. But there are some funky things like the screens which just don't make that much sense. The center screen is easy, but to me the more important screen is this front display, which can be kind of hard to see. I would have preferred a heads-up display, maybe something a bit closer integrated. It's just kind of hard to read and it's a bit weird. So there you have it. That is a quick look at the Subaru Solterra and in some sense the Toyota BZ4X. There's not actually that much that changes between the two vehicles with the exception of the Toyota offering a front-wheel drive version, though if you ask me, the all-wheel drive is probably the one you want. Now what do we think about the Subaru Solterra? Well, it's very much, I would say, more so Toyota. The Subaru differences comes in the form of the off-road modes and some of the interior material changes, but it's kind of a little bit of a letdown. That range limit, that EPA rated 222 miles is really low. These days it seems like most affordable EVs now have a range of around 300 miles, which I think is pretty good. Now, if you're going to be charging your vehicle every day or every other day, that's not really a big deal and really only use it for commuting, but that 300-mile range would be nice to have a bit of that extra tolerance if you're driving it to the next city over. If you're going to be commuting it for the whole week and want the charge to at least last you the whole week, it just seems like this can give you a little bit of added range anxiety when you use things like your heated seats, your ventilated seats often, air conditioning, etc. That can even drive that range down further. You do a lot of highway driving, like I said, that's about 160 miles approximately of highway driving, and that's just a little bit disappointing. There are cheaper vehicles that have a bigger range for the money. Now, let's say you were dead set on buying a Solterra or a BZ4X. Well, I think the lower trim models, I wouldn't go any higher than the Limited, are probably where the money's at, because you get the all-wheel drive regardless of which one you choose. So at the cheaper $45,000, you still get all-wheel drive. You just don't get things like heated seats or the Harman Kardon sound system, but you do get those in the Limited trim model, which is the next step up. It is the middle trim, and then the Touring trim is the one that gives you the ventilated seats and a lot of the luxuries that you might find at $55,000, which it's all fairly competitive. Obviously, $10,000 difference between the lowest and the highest trim is pretty good, but I would consider some other options. If you're dead set, take it for a drive. There's some weird, quirky things that just seem a little out of place. It seems like some of it was kind of thrown together, especially in the interior, and the exterior is not that good looking of a vehicle either. I want to like it. There are lots of good things in this vehicle. It's just a little bit of a quirky vehicle to say the least. But with that, that's going to be the end of the video. Feel free to let me know down below what you think of the Subaru Solterra or the Toyota BZ4X. If you enjoyed the video, could leave me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.